Welcome, everyone, to Indications and Warnings with Chuck Pfarrer, co-produced by Alan Brewer. Chuck and I are recording today's show, filled with maps, by the way. We are recording today's show on December 8, 2025. It's day 1,384 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. As I said, this show is filled with maps. We are going to go right to maps of Pokrovsk, really beginning with today's maps from December 8th. So I want to ask our subscribers, our viewers right now, to share this show as widely as possible for a couple of reasons. It's a current update that Chuck and I are able to deliver today. And secondly, this is Chuck's analysis from Chuck. There have been a few commentators on Twitter and on YouTube lately that have appropriated Chuck's analysis. They've given him credit, but as you all know, when you speak to Chuck Pfarrer, you get to go deep into what's happening in Ukraine. Chuck, it's good to be back with you.
Yeah, great to see you again, Alan. We've both been busy, and I miss being in the saddle, so I'm glad we're back.
5 weeks ago, the Russians claimed to have overrun Pokrovsk. Now, you look at today's map, and you can see there's no truth in that claim.
No, there isn't. And what we found, and what the Russians have found, is that they're no longer capable of conventional ground maneuver warfare. What does that mean? That means your artillery softens it up, and you've got tanks in a arrow formation, and behind them come all your infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. That quit working for the Russians about 3 years ago. But what they've discovered in the battle laboratory of Pokrovsk is that very small units, 3 to 5, sometimes even one guy at a time, can infiltrate a city. Now, that has worked to some extent. There are Russians almost in every block of Pokrovsk. People can see on the map here there, and one of our readers, Alan, said, look, this is like a heat map. And it is, because we've got darker red, and the pinkish sort of color means anybody can pop up anywhere at any time. So if you say, well, these small units, they have infiltrated and taken Pokrovsk, right? The Russians say they've taken it, but look, if you pop up around a corner and you got a Russian helmet on, it's over for you. But here's the thing: when you're depending on just infantry going in, you may get to a building and you may hold it, but you've only got the things you bring with you, right? The good thing about mechanized warfare is there are trucks and shit, right? And you get your ammunition in. These Russian units are very lightly armed. They have to be supplied by drone in many cases. But I want to tell you, my fighting gear used to weigh 60 pounds. Just my pistol, its magazines, my magazines, my radio. So you think about that. Not a lot of drones can lift. Let's just multiply that by 3, 180 pounds.
Yeah.
So you can see and this is what makes these successes, they're not so successful.
Well, I may be going too far here, Chuck, but it struck me that the Russians have actually created a huge problem for themselves. They've been helped in that creation by the Ukrainians for sure. What I mean by that is Russia can continue to infiltrate, and they do every single day. They lose probably half of these small units that infiltrate Pokrovsk. What Russia can't do is assemble and move a force that's large enough to occupy Pokrovsk. They have an occupation problem, in other words.
Yeah, they really do. What we see in the Pokrovsk city battle map, you see all this fighting going on in the city. But just to show the viewers, the solution to taking Pokrovsk and Moskovsky and Minorhad is to cut the M30 highway, right? So to go west of the city, get these big red pinchers to cut off the M30 highway. Russia can't do that. They don't have the ability, and they know it will not be successful if they put 100 main battle tanks leading 200 infantry fighting vehicles and drive for the M30 highway. In this war, that doesn't work. Now, you can look at me and go, Chuck, you're out of your mind. In the Battle of Vuhledar II, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians destroyed almost 100 Russian tanks, and this staggered me because I went back and checked the battle map. They lost almost 1,000 infantry fighting vehicles in 2 days of fighting. So, and look, hey, I'm not saying the U.S. Army would do better against the Ukrainian army, and believe me, there are some generals who are doing some serious thinking about that.
Yeah.
But Alan, that's one of those weirdly inverted new facts of warfare that have just occurred in this war for the first time.
Right. And in Pokrovsk, as I recall, Chuck, in the battle for Bakhmut, tanks, armored columns played a significant and decisive role at the end of that battle for the Russians. And Ukraine was active with tanks in the city of Bakhmut for months.
Yeah. So, we think of urban fighting and the cognitive dissonance, it resonates in the mind of every civilian and every military tactician. Notice I didn't say strategist, tactician. I mean, I'm not a strategist, I'm a tactician. And they think of Stalingrad, and that's the big thing. And Bakhmut was sort of the last conventional urban battle that will probably ever happen for the rest of military history, right? Ukraine's drone capabilities are 4 generations more advanced than they were during the Battle of Bakhmut. And since Vuhledar 1 and 2, man, things have changed on the battlefield. But here's another shocking thing. We're looking at Pokrovsk, and it's a mistake to look at these maps and see what has turned red and what has turned pink and think, look, this is really looking bad for Ukraine. I'll give you the fact that the situation is grave here, but I'm going to drop a statistic that I don't want people to forget. Russia has lost almost 250,000 casualties, taking Avdiivka, taking 20 months to go 20 miles to get to Pokrovsk. And the way it stands right now, Alan, is 20% of Russia's total casualties in this war, they are lying dead around Pokrovsk. So this is the quintessential, battle, grinding people up. This is the quintessential attritional battle of the 21st century, with no exaggeration.
Yeah. You know what is incredible to me, Chuck, because we haven't had the chance to speak lately. But 5 weeks ago, the settlements of Rudinsky, Minorad, Makovsky, and Pokrovsk, this tight little quadrant of urban area that defines the battle for Pokrovsk. They were each threatened in a different way, but they have held together. And Ukraine has used each and every one of them seemingly in turn to get Russians coming forward to annihilation.
Yeah. So the situation, I mean, it is so precarious that things could change, at any moment. But they haven't really changed for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And, General Sersky has been getting some heat, and I don't think it's always necessarily deserved here. But people saying, why are we still here? Why are you still trying to hold on to this? Well, those arguments are rendered moot because they have held on to it. And I'm not kidding. The secret to winning this war, to our Russian listening guests, and believe me, they know this, is closing the fingers of the mitten on the top with the thumb of the mittens on the bottom. They can't do that, Alan, and you and I know the reason why. When you stand in the middle of one of those fields and see tree line to the north, south, east, and west, you feel pretty naked standing up there.
Well, you can see all those open fields really between Rodinsky and Pokrovsk. So if you look north or west out of Pokrovsk, it's just open agricultural land. But the other thing I would say, Chuck, and I'd be interested in your analysis of this, the inability of Russia to occupy Pokrovsk, and for that matter, to overrun Rodinsky and Myrnarod and Makovsky, must say something about the cooperation of Russian commanders. Are they in competition with one another, or are they in cooperation with one another? To go as long as 5 weeks with such a superiority of forces and firepower and be unable to finish your battle plan, it is just astonishing to me.
Yeah, but we could look at a couple things. I'm always saying morale is abysmal, their logistics are abysmal, and their combat effectiveness is abysmal. That just means Chuck shooting his mouth off. Here's the proof of the pudding of the ineffectuality of these troops. They can't close this off. They can't do it. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. They're successfully infiltrating small units into the urban battle space. However, every time the Russians come in contact with Ukrainians, they lose 30 to 80% of their guys. Every time a Ukrainian shoots at a Russian, that's the math. Here's the other thing. We always talk about an army is like your leaf blower, right? You got to plug it into the house and then it blows the leaves. You unplug it, meaning ground lines of communication and supply, and it doesn't work so well at the end. And that's also the case here. You infiltrate 5 guys, and look, in 2 hours of fighting, they could be out of everything, including Band-Aids and water, right? So you throw these guys in, and they get gobbled up. And only the Russians fight like this.
Yeah.
The Chinese as well. Manpower, it's an expendable. It's a consumable like gasoline. They don't care. One of the reasons Ukraine is still in this fight right here, Alan, is because this is the best place on earth to kill Russians. Hundreds of them a day. And right now, this is the place, if you're a Russian and your number's up in Ukraine, chances are your number's up right here in this map we're looking at.
Yeah. The other thing I will point out, and I think this continues to be true, Ukraine is able to rotate forces into Pokrovsk and evacuate wounded from Pokrovsk. And so viewers, again, look at this map. When Chuck and I talk about Pokrovsk, we're not only talking about that city itself, we are talking about this wheel of urban area, even though Rodinsky is just a little farm village, but Rodinsky, Myrnarod, Moskovsky, and Pokrovsk, they define this concentrated area of operations. Those are the locations of the Battle of Pokrovsk. Chuck, would you say that Ukraine can continue to keep the Russians at bay here for weeks and weeks and weeks, or at some point will Russian mass just accomplish the job?
Well, you know what? Frankly, 4 weeks ago, I thought, man, this might be over. But that was a month ago. And, anything can happen in a battle at any time. But I will say this. Russia has failed for the last 6 weeks to take this city. Bear in mind how many times they said it's conquered. It obviously is not. No matter what anyone thinks, it isn't conquered. And here are things that are not going to improve for Russia. Their combat effectiveness is not going to get better. Their logistics are not going to get better because they're already using donkeys and motorcycles. And it's Santa time, boys and girls. It's winter in Ukraine. Good luck on that motorcycle, Ivan. I mean, totally good freaking luck.
Yeah.
That's why they don't have snow motocross. Okay, I'll just leave it there. And to our snowboarders, you never see the snowboarding mogul championship of the world, and snowboarders know why, right? It's not, you don't use a snowboard on moguls. So anyway, things are getting worse for Russia, and even to gladly embrace the pun, this may be a frozen section of the battlefield soon. And the worst part of the winter, Alan, as we both know, is coming.
It is coming. It hasn't been too wintry yet in Ukraine. Ragnar Gudmundsson, by the way, on his daily dashboard has added right at the top weather forecasts, which is a great addition that Ragnar made, because weather is really going to make a difference over the next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks. It's already making a difference, frankly, in the cities of Ukraine itself, because Russia, while somewhat stymied on the zero line, has undertaken a terror attack across Ukraine that has been horrific, really the largest terror attacks of the war. Yesterday, Kyiv had only 3 hours of electrical power, Chuck.
Yeah, it is. It's very disheartening. I mean, it is, as we both know, it is a beautiful, beautiful city. It is a metropolis.
Yeah.
It is a city. This is hard for Americans to understand. The city is 1,500 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. We don't have anything in the United States look. They got noodle bars that are older than our whole country. Okay.
Yes, this is true. But the noodles are fresh.
Absolutely.
But before we return to the maps, I do want to remind viewers of this massive Russian terror attack on the night of December 6th. 51 missiles, 653 drones aimed at Kyiv, Odessa, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Mykolaiv. So a substantial part of Ukraine. All of those cities and regions experienced power outages, and that means, Chuck, if Chuck and I were in Kyiv, we'd be trying to squeeze our entire day into a couple of hours.
Yeah, it would, and that, luckily, our last trip, we didn't have a whole lot of power problems, but, it takes a long time to get our material together, get it on. It depends on all sorts of communication modalities and data transfer and everything else. So it's sad.
Yeah, it is sad. We should, in addition to looking at these concentrated maps of Pokrovsk, look at a very large scale area of operations map that stretches from Chasiv Yar, so from the suburbs of Kostyantynivka all the way down to Pokrovsk. Now, I happen to think the Russians have created a huge problem for themselves in Pokrovsk, but I think they are creating a huge problem for themselves outside Kostyantynivka as well.
They really are. It's interesting. We're looking at this map. This is the 8 December 1530 UTC map. The line there that we see, between Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut, Bakhmut is a battle that is in the class of Pokrovsk. The Russians lost about 150,000, maybe 170,000, and it might be higher, people in the campaign to take Bakhmut. And this is 2.5 years later, and I still see Chasiv Yar sticking right in the craw of the Russians. They got so attrited, so culminated, so jacked up after that battle, Alan, they couldn't advance for 2.5 years. And it isn't that hard to know why. They are running the same twosies, threesies, foursies infiltration processes against Kostianfika. And look, this is right where you and I were. We were in Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka. We got pretty close. Our good friend of ours, Kostianfika, was hot then. They went in and out, and God bless them. We were worried about them, but
Yeah.
they got in and out.
That was back in the fall.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, just a few months ago, Kostianivka was being evacuated. There are still a few thousand people in Kostianivka. The other thing to point out about Russian tactics right now is the level of destruction they are inflicting on Ukraine, especially here in the east, in the Donbass. They've destroyed Pokrovsk, and there is nothing left of Pokrovsk. They are in the course of destroying Minorod and Moskovsky. They are dropping glide bombs on Kostianivka, on Druzhkivka, and on Kramatorsk, where you and I stayed, Chuck, every single day. So basically, the Russians have decided what we cannot take, we will destroy. It will be useless to Ukraine, and it obviously is useless to Russians if they actually succeed in occupying any of these cities.
Yeah, you sometimes they want things, and don't they may get them.
Yeah.
The war aims have not changed. We're swinging around these negotiations. We may or may not even talk about it. But what is Russia demonstratively trying to do to Ukraine? It is to absolutely destroy it, right? The goal of the special military operation was to decapitate Ukraine's political class, to re-exert the colonial arrangement between Russia and Ukraine, and Russia is proving it. Everything to the east of our zero line is totally destroyed. Right? They've destroyed virtually everything, with the exception of the city of Donetsk, because they were able to get there and use it, for their purposes, including turning schools into ammunition depots.
Yeah.
Right? That's how they take the local population hostage. They store 5,000 missile motors in a downtown area, right? So if you hit it, you're going to take out the blocks. But Alan and I saw this constantly. The closer you get to the zero line, the more Russia has destroyed. Individual barns, that bridge that we went over Kramatorsk that was in Kharkiv when we were heading north. Just bombed it for shits and giggles, right? Hey, we can reach it, so let's destroy it.
Yeah. Well, we should talk about these peace talks, which have taken on a life of their own. They seem to be completely unrelated to what's happening on the ground, Chuck. And with this big area of operations map still up, it's the appropriate time to talk about these peace talks, because the part of Ukraine, it's roughly 30% of the Donbass that Ukraine continues to control. It's right here in this map. So it's from Kostianivka up the road through Druzhkivka and Kramatorsk, and you continue along to Sloviansk. There are more than 100,000 Ukrainians who live here still. Even though Kostyantynivka has been almost fully evacuated, the Russians have destroyed all 5 hospitals in Kostyantynivka. They've destroyed the infrastructure of the city, and they are going to do to Kostyantynivka what they did to Bakhmut and what they've done to Pokrovsk and so many other towns and small cities and villages in Ukraine. Russia is out to level Kostyantynivka with glide bombs and drones and missiles.
You know, we are so used to just saying this, and you know, it doesn't even stick. Russia has destroyed almost 2,000 hospitals and medical facilities in Ukraine. Right? So some jackass gets in his Su-34. He's got his glide bombs on. He's got his Garmin GPS running. That's right, just like the kind you buy at a truck stop. And he whoops them out on all 5 hospitals in Kostyantynivka. Ha ha ha. They, like I said, 2,000 times they've done that. Oh no, they didn't. They utterly wiped out 3/4 of the medical facilities in Syria.
Yeah.
Right? It takes 2 milliseconds to destroy a hospital. It takes 5 years to build one.
Yeah. Well, this is the way Russia is fighting this war, and this is also why you are correct when you call it a genocide against Ukraine. They want a Ukraine without Ukrainians. They want an uninhabitable Ukraine. But it's this part of eastern Ukraine that the United States seems to think Ukraine will simply give to the Russians after 4 years of this fighting. Russia has been unable to take this super fortified part of eastern Ukraine. Why in the world would Ukraine simply hand it over? I mean, it's completely unreasonable.
You know, Ellen, you just hit it. And as you were saying, I like 3-year-old kids because they say things like, why? Okay, we're going to give, we want to give Donbass to Russia. I like this. Bring in the 3-year-old kid. Why? Because they came in and took it? Because they've killed 30 or 40,000 Ukrainian civilians and close to 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers? So we're going to give it to them, right? You know, there's something in Washington that's going on that just, they're in their own private Idaho. They just don't get it. We're going to sit down with Russia. Let me give you the subtitles: the colonial power, and we're gonna divvy up your country. Sit down, Mr. Zelensky. I'm talking. I just got the FIFA World Peace Prize, okay, that I put on my own neck. I'm going to tell you how this is going to go. And you know what, Zelensky? God bless him. He's going, no, dude, no. And that, unfortunately, he is dealing with probably the most capricious and unpredictable, and that is not a compliment when you are in charge of the United States of America. He has to deal with that person.
Yeah. And
look, I'm a one-trick pony. I mean, I am not pro-Trump. I'm not anti-Trump. I wasn't pro-Trump. I wasn't anti-Biden. But there is a clear right and wrong here, Alan. And you and I have been Americans a long time, and I hope the basic truths about this country have not changed. But I don't know if that's true anymore.
I don't know if it's true anymore either. I sincerely hope they haven't changed. And if they have changed, I hope it's just for the briefest time possible so that America and Americans rediscover the values that they have fought for in the past, and that they have fought beside allies with always. That now, speaking of American support of Ukraine, all the latest polls show that Americans fully support Ukraine's self-defense and Americans support the idea of continued aid to Ukraine, including military aid to Ukraine. So in this regard, the Trump administration is completely out of step with the sentiments of the American people. Americans continue to support Ukraine. We can, put those polls up or link to those polls in the video description, but there's no doubt about the support of Ukraine here in the United States of America.
Yeah, and Alan, if these were political numbers, if these were votes, it would be what used to be called a landslide, right?
Yeah.
Better than 60%. I'm sorry, better than 60%. Still know the difference between right and wrong, and good and evil.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, right? And the coverage of the war is so lopsided. The BBC itself will go 7 days without printing anything about Ukraine, right? Even, let's talk about what happened literally last night before last. 60 ballistic missiles were fired at cities in Ukraine. On what planet is that okay? And specifically, ballistic missiles with cluster munitions hitting civilian neighborhoods. Hey, BBC. Hello? Anybody?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you want to know what those cluster munitions are. I mean, if you have a bag of marbles in your house left over from when you were a kid, or your grandkids still play marbles or something like that, just scoop up in your two hands as many marbles as you can hold, and now imagine that those marbles are packed into ballistic missiles. They're in the ballistic missiles, of course, they are metallic shrapnel cubes that explode and cast a lethal cloud across an entire neighborhood, Chuck.
Yeah, so imagine something that is the size of, they come in all sorts of different sizes, but imagine something a little bigger than a soup can, all the way up to a small coffee can. It bursts, the missile comes down, and at about 500 feet, again, this depends on the radar altimeter, these things are blown out of racks inside the missile. And they have a long ribbon on them, just like a piece of canvas, long, narrow. And as the cluster bomb falls down, the ribbon whips around. It spins a tool that arms, removes the safety from the actual bomblet. Whatever it hits, it has a shape charge. So if it landed on your car, it would blow a hole all the way through the car and about 7 feet down into the concrete. And it also has fragmentation. So in addition to, giving you a headache in your car, it will blast 2, 3, 4 lanes of interstate with the shrapnel. Those things were designed to actually take out tanks and kill infantry en masse. So the Russians use them against apartment building.
Yeah.
And listen, we reported from the wreckage of those apartment buildings in Kharkiv. We know what we're talking about.
We do know what we're talking about. Look, the Russians use these missiles on every Ukrainian city that we visited, Chuck, frankly. Yeah. They use them on Kramatorsk, Kharkiv, Sumy. They use them on Kherson, Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kyiv itself. Yeah, the other thing that Russia is intent on doing is pushing that forward line of battle close enough to major cities like Kharkiv that they can bring the suburbs of Kharkiv at least under artillery fire. So within artillery range. It's really just like what has happened in Kherson. Kherson is within artillery range, and this is also where the Russians practice a human safari with their drones. That's the other, excuse me, that's the other thing Russia wants to do. in every city. It's what Russia is doing on the road from Kostyantynivka all the way up to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. They are bringing their human drone safari to every city in Ukraine they possibly can. And these are war crimes that Russia commits every single day against unarmed civilians in Ukraine cities.
So I was taught as a SEAL to polarize every problem, right? Just turn it around. Okay, what would this look like if Ukraine was applying, 200 or 300 FPV drones a day just to hunt the cities, the streets of Donetsk, and just kill anybody that they saw? Old lady with a pram and groceries, kill her. And people standing in line in front of a clinic, kill them. Fire truck, kill them. When you put it like that, holy cow. But it happens every day, as you know, every day in Kherson. They carry that out every single day in Kherson.
Yeah. And they've done it in Kostyantynivka, they've done it in Sumy. And of course they did it in Pokrovsk before Pokrovsk was fully evacuated. And they will do it everywhere and anywhere they can. Well, but before we leave this area of operations map, Chuck, this is going to be Ukraine's longest winter. I mean, you look at the contact points on the zero line, you consider what Russia has done to the power infrastructure so far in November and December. This is going to be Ukraine's longest winter, and it's going to push Ukraine probably to the edge.
Yeah, and I think the other side of the coin as well. Now, I'm not very well versed in economics, unlike our gifted friend Jason Smart. But I've been increasingly reading that there are some economists who estimate that Russia has about 12 or 18 more months of war in them in terms of, paying for it. Now, there's lots of other ways for sovereign governments to pay for things like, printing more money and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I have never said this before, and Alan and I have been working together for almost 4 years now, and I've never, ever said this, that this may be the most crucial winter of the war. And I think that's going to be true for both sides. Let's assume right now Pokrovsk falls right now. Russia has got 100,000 mouths to feed in the ruins of this city that has no water. You can't turn a tap. There's no electricity. There's no glass in that whole city.
No.
There's not a single pane of glass anywhere. And now, from my lips to God's ears, you're going to have 20 or 30, 40,000 Russian troops in that blasted city, and they're not going to have anything to eat. And they are not going to be kept warm. And they are not going to get water. And they are going to be in those buildings. I want to just say something, and Alan knows this too as an outdoorsman. I used to do a lot of mountaineering, high altitude ice climbing. And on summit day, we'd all put a thermos of like chili in our backpacks and take it up, because it literally could be the thing that saved your life if you got avalanched in or you had to dig a snow cave and ride it out for 3 days. A hot can of chili could save your life. There ain't going to be no hot cans of chili for these Russians. There is not. And we already know there is no medical care. If you are not a commissioned officer, you don't get medevac. Okay, so I get shot in the hand, right? That's okay, right? 4 or 5 days, I've got a Staph aureus infection, and 7 days after that, it's gangrenous, right? That's another reason why the Russian casualties, normally you get 1 guy killed, 3 guys wounded. The net result of that in the Russian army is 4 guys dead because they don't get treated. It's astounding. No medevac, right? We have whole organizations that risk their life under fire to bring a helicopter in to get every wounded American on the slab in an operating room within an hour. Not the Russians.
Yeah, the Russians don't evacuate their wounded from the battlefield. It's hard to believe. Whereas the Ukrainians go to extraordinary lengths to evacuate their wounded, and they have developed now an entire cadre of ground drones. These are robots whose primary purpose is to carry a wounded Ukrainian soldier off the front line and into the rear where he can get immediate medical attention. It might take a bit more than an hour, frankly. But the other thing I'll say is Ukrainians don't give up on their wounded comrades. They will send a ground robot repeatedly to retrieve a single soldier. There have been stories about it I've seen posted on Twitter, Chuck, and the devotion that Ukrainian soldiers feel toward one another really makes a significant difference on the battlefield.
You know, it does. And this comes into this incalculable mix that produces high combat effectiveness, right? We have literally seen videos of one Russian soldier passing a wounded Russian soldier and shooting him in the head. We have seen them run away from a guy who's on fire. You know, there is no internal cohesion in these units, right? This is why they lose from 30 to 80% of their casualty on every contact. They're still doing that thing. 32% of the vehicles that come in contact, all the hatches are open, the windshield wipers are going, and the Russians run.
Yeah.
That's why.
Well, just one final comment on this theater of operations map, Chuck. It strikes me that when, look at Kostya Tanivka and look at the axis of advance that Russia dearly wants to attack through, and that is from Kostya Tanivka right up to Kramatorsk and beyond Kramatorsk. So to the northwest, roughly. You go and look at Pokrovsk. Really, the axis of advance that Russia would pursue would take you as the crow flies to Dnipro City, so almost directly west. In other words, these axes of advance diverge. Russia will have to choose one of them. And this is also why Russia is pressuring Ukraine to cede all of this land between Kostya Tanivka and Sloviansk, which is just off the map north of Kramatorsk. This is, again, why Putin is working with Trump to offer such a poison pill to Ukraine, to give up this fortification, super fortified, the home of more than 100,000 Ukrainians still today. And this is what Putin wants most of all, so that he can pour his military towards Dnipro City. He wouldn't have to choose which way to go.
You know, Putin's military aims may be unachievable. And I say this for a couple of reasons. Despite everything I say about the Russian army, and I stand by all of it, there's another weird factor about Russian contact with Ukraine. Quite counterintuitively, the larger the force that Russia tries to project, 3 companies of, or, a brigade task group of mechanized forces, when they do that, they lose even bigger, right? for example, just at the end of the summer in Kupiansk, they sent 2 battalions towards the Oskil River, and they were destroyed in 45 minutes. Right? And you say, well, how could that be? Well, it's easy when you line them up bumper to bumper on a road, headlight to taillight, and the Ukrainians blow up the first vehicle and hit the last vehicle and then drone swoop everything else. So these distances that Alan is talking about, they may no longer be achievable, no matter the preponderance of force. And that road, Alan and I know this, we spent, I don't know, most of a week here.
Yeah.
And the road from Kostianvinka to Druzhkivka, there's this shallow valley. They're going to get eaten alive in there.
Yeah. And that road is completely under nets, by the way. It was when Chuck and I drove along it. Yeah. No, I see that this is where Putin has gotten himself to. He cannot achieve his military goals without the help of Donald Trump at the diplomatic table. And it is unfair completely and underhanded, frankly, that Trump would even suggest to Ukraine that it cede land and give up the lives of Ukrainian people themselves to the aggressor, to the invader. I mean, the United States would never, ever consider such an offer, would it, Chuck?
No, absolutely. Let's let's put it this way. Why don't we give up Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas? Come on, I mean, really? Come on. All those people, they've all got a various degree of a Southern accent, so but come on. And look, I had a referendum. It was really easy. 3 soldiers knock on your door, and we've seen the video.
Yeah.
Bang on the door with a rifle butt, and they stick the ballot under your nose and say, here you go. You want to be part of Russia, don't you? What are you going to say? Here's the other thing. They also say you get down to City Hall and you surrender your documents and you get a Russian passport, or you have no protection of law.
Right.
Your property is not recognized. You have no recourse, no legal recourse for anything. You get no services, no medical, no power, no internet, no nothing. You can't drive a car. You can't even own a car.
Nope.
What a referendum, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's no one in Ukraine who wants to be part of Russia, not after what they have been through in the last 4 years. Well, Chuck, you mentioned Kupiansk, and that is going to be the last map we take a look at on indications and warnings today. It's the same story of Russian infiltration and inability of Russia to assemble large forces, to assemble armored columns, and move decisively into a Ukrainian city. And Kupiansk, as well as Pokrovsk, one of those places that Gerasimov has boasted to Putin of occupying. And again, you look at the maps. I don't care if you look at the Ukrainian Defense Ministry maps, or if you consider some of the maps that are published by Russian mill bloggers. There is no evidence, either in Pokrovsk or Kupiansk, of Russian occupation.
No, and it's good that we turn to Kupiansk here. This is where Gerasimov finally jumped the shark, right? He told Putin on 30 November that contradictorily, you just figure out how you'd like to be in the room when this brief was given. I have totally seized Kupiansk, sir. And not only have I totally taken over the city, but I have surrounded 15 battalions of Ukrainians in the city. So wait a minute, there's 15 battalions of Ukrainian troops in the city? Yes, sir. But you've captured the whole city? Yes, sir. I have them surrounded. So they're all in touch with each other. I guess they're in a triangle. Okay. So finally the word got to Putin. Look, this is horseshit. And Gerasimov disappeared. State television said he was being, investigated for corruption. And in Russia, folks, the accusation is the trial.
Yeah.
Not your indictment, just the accusation. No one has seen Gerasimov since then. And the situation in Kupiansk has actually gotten clearer because the Russians have been now driven back to the very northern limits of the city. Previously, they had two tentacles on either side of the P79 extending south into the city. They've been cleaned up. Right. So once again, effective. Just keep saying we took it. There is no Stalingrad. We took it. It just bangs into your head, and these things aren't true.
Yeah.
They declared Pokrovsk taken. I counted it 15 times in November. Right. The fight's still on, and in Kupiansk, the situation reversed itself.
Yeah. Well, I think Russia will have the opportunity to proclaim occupation of Kupiansk and Pokrovsk at least 10 more times just in the month of December. But this is going to be a rough winter for Ukraine, and because Russia has succeeded in striking the power infrastructure in particular, and continue to do that. As I mentioned, Kyiv had only 3 hours of electricity yesterday. The city is loud with the sound of electrical generators, but you can't run a country's economy on electric generators, and you just can't do it.
Yeah, and there are most businesses will have varying degrees of sophistication in self-generated electricity. I mean, it's, they plan ahead, but it's still, it's tough. And for the average person, things are tough there.
Yeah.
And let's think about it. That's what happened, and that was the Russian military objective. So let's think about that. And no matter what's going on with the long-range drones and strategic strikes that Ukraine does, you know what you don't see? Willy-nilly attacks on Russian population bases. It doesn't happen. Every now and then, though, you'll see a hole in the 21st floor of a Russian skyscraper, but those are offices linked to the FSB. It's not a coincidence that it just happens to hit the West Side 21st floor in 24B, right? That's all planned, but there's not an equivalency morally or militarily between Ukrainian targets and Russian targets.
No, there hasn't been since the first day of this war, and there never will be as long as the war goes on. So it strikes me in a way, Chuck, that Ukraine is in the position today of managing consequences. Some of these consequences are not of Ukraine's own making. The primary consequence that Ukraine has to manage is the failure of the United States and its European and democratic allies around the world to fully arm Ukraine in order to defend itself. This is something that could and should have been done 4 years ago. There's little likelihood that it will be done now. Even though the United States has appropriated $400 million to fund military assistance for Ukraine, I don't expect a penny of that money to be spent on military aid for Ukraine, which is a sad commentary on the United States. So that's one consequence that Ukraine is having to manage. The other consequence is lack of air defense. Again, 4 years into the war, Ukraine needs more air defense. It's able to shoot down about 50% of the missiles that Russia increasingly is aiming at Ukrainian cities. So, in a week's time, Russia is going to fire 70 odd missiles at Ukrainian cities, and Ukraine will succeed in shooting down, about half of them. And the other consequence that Ukraine is having to manage is its manpower shortage, and this really does go to the heart of what Ukraine is fighting for, its survival and its future. Ukraine does suffer from a manpower shortage. It has tried to make up for that shortage through innovation in drone warfare. And yes, it has succeeded in some ways, but it cannot succeed in all ways. And it's up to Ukraine to decide how it will address the manpower shortage. We can't give them a solution for that, Chuck.
No, and this war is pretty unique in that the average age of a combatant is 45 years old, and that isn't a bell curve, meaning, well, there's so many 17-year-olds, etc. The mode, the number that occurs, psychology majors know statistics, the number that occurs most likely is that combatant is between 40 and 50 years old. Wow. I see what President Zelensky is trying to do, and he's trying not to sacrifice Ukraine's future on the battlefield. And, manpower, it definitely is a problem, but it has compelled Ukraine to find technological solutions to increase their combat efficiency in defense. And the numbers at the point of contact, folks, they would astound you.
Yeah.
It's not unusual at all for a Ukrainian position to be outnumbered 20-1 at the point of attack. Wow, that's Alamo time in my day. It was over. But those positions that Ukraine has outnumbered to that extent, for example, around Kremenna, they hold. And they put a hurting on everyone who comes in contact with them. So try to imagine that number, Russia losing between 30 and 80% of the contacting force when they outnumber the defenders 10, 15, 20-1. Now you see why I'm constantly raving about lack of combat effectiveness. That's the insoluble problem for Russia, Alan, as you and I know. They're not going to get better at that.
No. They're not going to get better at it. They haven't gotten better at it. But it also speaks to the success that Ukraine has had in building defensive lines. That is actually something Ukraine has gotten better at. They failed in a few places on the zero line to build adequate defensive lines, for example, between Avdiivka and Pokrovsk. But they have built those defensive lines outside Pokrovsk now. They have built them in the east between Kostyantynivka and Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, heavily fortified. They're good at it. And the other thing it speaks to is the success of Ukraine's drone wall of defense. And, this gets to one of your favorite phrases of mine, Chuck. Don't send a soldier where you can send a grenade. Well, you got to send a soldier to throw the grenade. But today it's don't send a soldier where you can send a drone, even though you have to send a drone team forward somewhere to get that drone flying over a kill zone. And this is the other thing that Ukraine has been able to do. You can see it in Pokrovsk. You can see it in other areas along the zero line. It's Ukraine that has been able to expand this gray zone, this kill zone. Yes, Russia has some drone advantages of its own, and Russia also expands the kill zone wherever it can. But this is the Ukrainian innovation of this war. How can we use drones to make 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers so lethal that no Russian dare set foot there?
Yeah, it is really, and we've seen this war go from, first it was Bayraktar, UCAVs firing missiles. And that is so 20th century, right? Now you have drone wave attacks. Some drones go up, they're completely unarmed. They're simply reconnaissance platforms. Some are simply communications platforms. And, here's something that changes completely. If I have a battalion of artillery firing in support of me, they can be counter battery fired, right? There are battlefield radars that will tell you the shell's in the air. It knows what caliber it is, where it's going to hit, and where the tube was that fired it. But you send 400 drones up into the air, which is not an inconceivable number. For example, right now in Pokrovsk, I bet there's 1,000 drones in the air just in Pokrovsk.
Yeah.
And there's no way to counter battery fire those things, right? The targeting is all got to be visual. And where are you going to find that? Under what room in what apartment building? Where is the drone controller? And they're often 100 kilometers away. And that makes a big difference. And the Russians are paying for that every day.
Yeah.
If you die in a Russian uniform, chances are you got killed by a drone. Ouch.
85% chance you were killed by a drone, as a matter of fact. That's how drones have basically taken over and dominated the battlefield. Well, as you can see, Chuck, I'm losing the light here yet in the far north where I am right now. But we are not going to lose the light that we keep lit for Ukraine. And Chuck and I will be back with more analysis, more maps, more good conversation. And it's a conversation we want our viewers to get engaged in. And you can do that by posting your questions and comments in the section below the video. Share indications and warnings with others. Post about it on Twitter. If you see someone, an analyst or an OSINT fellow on Twitter benefiting from Chuck's analysis, the best thing to do is to post a link to this show in a reply and say, you might want to listen to Chuck Pfarrer himself. That's what I prefer to do. That's the benefit I've had for 4 years now of working with Chuck.
Well, I can't do it without Alan, folks, and he is an extraordinarily modest guy. But listen, I saw the quality of the journalism he was doing in Ukraine, and he's got a gift. But thank you for listening, and I hate to be the guy that says this. I have to read a cue card to actually see, click notifications, ring, whatever it is, but spread the word. And we thank you for several thousand people following us here. We're not the biggest thing, but we appreciate every listener we have, really. And we love to read the comments. And please feel free to bonk a troll while you're in there.
And join us every time Chuck and I say, Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava. Good night, everybody.